Hi, everybody. This is just going to be a real quick follow-up tutorial for those students who are in my 414 class, covering what we looked at in class the last couple of weeks. For those of you who are subscribers, I will be putting together a more in-depth series on process to go from SketchUp to Lumion using the new Live Sync feature, and all about how you can work with plant materials, landforms, object materials, and also a little bit about how to use it as part of the design process instead of just using Lumion as a finished visualization tool once you've got your design figured out. So this is just going to be a quick compilation. Again, stay tuned. I'm going to put together a more in-depth sequence later on that you can follow through, from how to prep the SketchUp model to how to work out the details of your finished renderings and animations in Lumion. Okay, for this, just as a quick review, I'm going to touch on all the tools we covered in class. I've got the basic park model here in SketchUp. It's got the landforms, unique materials applied to everything. And I'll talk more about that again in terms of how you prep a SketchUp model. But the first thing I'm going to do is just go to my extensions and go to Lumion Live Sync and start Live Sync up. And you notice I've got the screen split. Remember, you can use the Alt spacebar shortcut in order to activate the resize window command to get your windows to fit. I've got a wide format screen, which helps, but you can do this with anything. Now in this one, again, in class, I'd solved this problem by moving the SketchUp model up in the SketchUp environment. Here, this is a slightly different base model. You can see in Lumion, it's actually kind of halfway down into the landform in Lumion itself. So I'll show you how to fix that in Lumion. That's easy enough to do. We're going to activate the window. Just going to go to my Objects tab down here and click on the little rectangular marquee and to go into Move mode. I'm going to choose Change Height, and then just grab this button, hold the left mouse down, and pull it up until the water and everything else is up out of there. Now, one of the things you'll notice about Live Sync when I'm working with this in SketchUp, it's pretty close, but as soon as I activate this window in build mode, it zooms out. Right now, there's no way to change the focal length of your camera in build mode. There is a way to do that in photo mode, and so that's the mode I usually work in. So the first thing, I want to set these to be the same, and that way I've got a nice sync between SketchUp and Lumion in terms of how the image is actually displayed. In SketchUp, you can go to Camera and choose Field of View. And you'll notice down here, right now, I've got a 35-degree field of view in SketchUp. So if I come back to Lumion, go to my photo mode, I can come back here and set this up to a 35mm field of view too. And then click on Build with Effects. So now I'm in full window mode, but you can see it has a pretty even our direct relationship between Lumion and SketchUp now, which makes it a lot easier to work with. And when I click back here, it doesn't change the focal length, so I don't have to worry about having a different view and trying to zoom in using Lumion's tools, which I think take a little longer than navigating in SketchUp. All right, so the first thing we're going to do over here in Lumion, because we're going to be adding some plants, trees, and shrubs and things, which we want to rest on this new landform, not the landform that exists in Lumion. And I just started Lumion up and chose the flat kind of background to begin with. So the first thing we need to do is mark this object as terrain. And the way we do that is to, again, we can go into the Objects tab or area. We can click on the context menu and then click on the entire model. And we want to go to Extra and mark as terrain, and choose on. It says on will lock model. And that just means, like, if you wanted to manipulate the landform in Lumion, you couldn't do that. But you can always go back and unlock it and then lock it back up again. Okay, so now when we start adding things in trees, people, whatever it might be, Lumion understands that this is terrain, and we can use the drop to ground function in the context menu later on if we need to align things, and I'll show you how that works in a little bit. Again, I'm just going to run through kind of each of the things we covered kind of quickly, just as a quick review. So the first thing I usually do is, and you can do it in any order, but just because all the materials are here and visible, it's easier for me to cover the materials first, add objects later, because then I've already got the base plane pretty much done. So if I zoom in a little bit on this, you can see I'm going to switch now to my materials mode. And I've created unique materials in SketchUp. So this green is lawn. This is something I'm just going to fill with a leaf material. So this will be more forested and some kind of ground cover. I've got a slightly different material along the stream bank, so if I want to vary that, I can. And this material also goes down into these planting areas here. But if I wanted to change those to a different material, I could do that as well. So in Lumion, once I switch to my material mode, I can just pick the unique material that I want. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to choose nature and leaves and just pick one of these. And you can see if I zoom in on that now, how that's just added that leaf texture all the way across there. Now I can always add other plants, flowers, herbaceous materials to break that up. And if you break this up in SketchUp, it doesn't have to be one monolithic planting. I've just kept this model simple for demonstration purposes. You can also double click in Lumion on that particular leaf texture and come in here and adjust the spread of it, you can adjust the leaf size. If you want it finer or coarser, you can adjust the leaf type. It just cycles through the basic types that we have. I kind of like that green. And you can do an offset so that it creates more irregularity as it moves up and down, since that cover wouldn't be perfectly uniform. If I switch over to the grass here, and grass is something that Lumion has a built-in function. So anything that's designated as a landform material, you can automatically grow grass on. So if I select that one and go to custom and choose landscape, now you can see, again, if I move down here, it's changed a little bit, but it doesn't look like there's any grass there, and there isn't. So what I need to do is come back to here, go to my landscape, go to my grass tab, and turn that grass on and off. And you can see once that's activated, I've got an adjustment here for grass size, grass height. Wildness has to do with whether it's super uniform like a manicured lawn versus kind of clumpy like natural grass. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see I can adjust this up now, make it taller or shorter. If you want to add some irregularity, you can say, well, I'm going to have dandelions in here, and you'll see a few of those, breaks it up. So there are different options. You can come in here, add leaves in there, things like that. Okay, so just in a couple clicks, I've got my ground area covered with either ground cover or lawn. I'm going to zoom in on the center here. Again, go back to my materials, pick this vegetation, nature, leaves. I'll pick a different one around the pond. That's a little too strong. Again, just to kind of get these large areas of ground cover figured out. Okay. Let's see. Let's move around here to some of the paving material then. Let's go back to Lumion, pavers. This, I'm going to go to outdoor, maybe pick something like this. And again, I can't map it around the curve, but I can double click on this. I can adjust the scale of it however I like. I can adjust the relief up or down so it looks like the joints are more or less recessed. I usually drop the gloss and reflectivity down a little bit. I can add some weathering to it, and I can round the edges if I want to do that as well. And if I click on this option, the little curved arrow, I can adjust the heading. So let's say maybe I want that to be more perpendicular to the edges a little bit. Again, this is a curved walkway, so it's not going to look the same everywhere, but I can adjust that setting in there. Okay, here's another kind of paving here. Do the same thing outdoor. Got a couple different tabs here, maybe. Let's see, maybe the last one here. Let's go something a little simpler, or maybe just for contrast, I'll go to the bricks. Again, I'll change my point of view, zoom in a little bit. Once I've picked that, I can double click. Again, change the heading here to make that more similar to what I've got. Again, your choice of materials is up to you. I'm going to adjust this, but just showing you how you can apply those different materials very quickly. Let's go down and take a look at the wall. So I've got the wall material, outdoor. That's a little too neat. Let's try this one. How about this one? And again, I'm going to double click. I don't like to scale that so much. I'm going to adjust that down a little bit. Really quick and easy way to go through and adjust those materials. And I usually just spin around and look at those. So that's how you go in and just very quickly. The key is to have unique materials on unique objects. So again, there's coping on the top of this wall. I want to go in and adjust that. Go outdoor, concrete, and let's see what we got here. Maybe something has a little more texture in it. And this is a case where if I double click, since that coping has a sharp edge there, I'd like to go down to weathering and not only add a little weathering, but I'm going to pull the edges so the edges are actually rounded off. Now you can see what's super sharp in SketchUp now is this nice rounded edge in Lumion, so that you don't get that feeling that it's perfectly even and perfectly sharp. Okay, and I can adjust that. So I don't have to worry about rounding this geometry in SketchUp. I just have a function that does that automatically for me. And when that renders out, it'll be really nice and smooth there. Okay, so that's kind of how we approach the materials in Lumion. Really easy if you have unique materials. I guess I should look at the default material here is actually some water. So I'm going to go into water, and I can pick something like flat water, which gives me the basic start. And then I can double click on that also, and maybe adjust the wave height up a little bit, maybe the glossiness down a little. I can adjust the wave scale, caustic scale, and wave height. So we can adjust that a little bit. Now, some of these, if they have foam built into them, like this one does, I adjust that. You can see the foam. If you don't want to see that, you can just adjust that foam out of there. Probably wouldn't have that. And now you can see that working down below. There actually is another material in there, which I don't know if I can get to very easy, but the best thing is, and I don't remember if I did it on this one yet. I think I applied it. Yeah, you can see how kind of this material right here, that's what I want. Let's see, small aggregate, and just get a piece of that. Go to outdoor, maybe nature, soil, and pick some kind of ground up. It really is helpful if you do go in, maybe something like that's a little darker, and actually create a new material on the bottom surface, so you can kind of see, when you see through the water, you can see where this vegetation goes in, but then there's another material down below there that it does affect how the water looks and how the light reflects off the bottom and changes the appearance of the water. So instead of having this vegetation go all the way through there, actually have another material in there to represent soil or dirt on the bottom of the pond area there. Okay, so that's pretty much materials. Pretty easy way to do that. And if you need to, you can always adjust some of the qualities, like the orientation and things given the particular view you're taking. If you can't, do real complex UV mapping in here, at least you can adjust it for a particular view. Okay, so let's move on now to placing objects. And in this case, that's going to be mainly plants for this exercise. So I'm going to go back to my place mode. And we've got two ways to do that. We can place plants one at a time, or we can place them in a mass placement option. So first, maybe I'll zoom in here and just say, okay, I'm going to set up a view from here looking over across the water at the pavilion. And I want to add some other detailed plants to this area that I'm going to be looking at as I come down this ramp into the lower area around the pond. So I'm going to set up my view in SketchUp, jump back here. I'm going to select an object and go over to flowers. Maybe we'll start with some daisies here. Now in this case, I could come in here and you can see the preview and just kind of place those as I want, but it's going to be a lot faster since I want a mass of those to choose mass placement. And I just click there, I drag, click another point, and if I want to keep going, I'll hold the control key down and it will give me another option. So I'll add that far. And then I can come in here and adjust the number of items up. I want to randomize the direction a little bit. And I can do a random offset, bump the items up, bump the items up a little bit to kind of fill that in. Once I'm done with that, I just click check, and that's kind of placed in there now. But if I want to switch to a different set, let's maybe I pick some blue flowers that are going in behind there. I'll rotate my view a little bit. I'm going to do mass placement again, and this time I'm going to start over here. And what you'll notice is it's actually is placing those flowers, but it's still got the daisies mixed in with it. And so I can fix that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and place these to where I want, and then just come down here and hover over this and hit the trash can, and that will delete that. And now I can do this. I can adjust the offset if I want those to fill in and fill that in. So now if I come back to my, eye level view in SketchUp, you can see I'm starting to really get a feel for placing those different types of plants in there, and nice massings that give me a little interest in the foreground. So let's take a look at the sides then. In order to frame this view, I'm thinking maybe now I'm going to come back here, go back to individual object placement, and let's go to some large trees, and it's oak. Let's see, what do we have here? Let's just go American elm here. And again, place a couple of these in here to start looking at how I might frame the view. And again, coming back into SketchUp, you can start seeing how that shading and the overhead canopy starts defining that a little bit more. If I want to spin around here, back into Lumion, so I can adjust that density. Maybe I want some understory plants in there. I'll come in here, switch over to my small leaf. Got some flowering dogwoods. And these come in at a specific size, but once I've got them placed in here, I can come back to move mode and say size object, hover over this, and I can pull that one down a little bit. Maybe I want to make that one a little bit smaller. And I can rotate them around, do any kind of adjustments that I want to them. Okay, so let's go back to model with effects and click back in SketchUp. Go back to the kind of the primary view I was thinking about looking at. And again, if I really want to make my life a little easier, right, let's back up some. Use our little set view icon. Okay, I've got that set. I can come over to my tray, go down to scenes, add a scene. Okay, so now if I start navigating around, I can always just click on that scene. And I'm just going to come back to that view so I can always see what it looks like. So now maybe I'll come back over to my Lumion and go back to individual place object, go to plants, or maybe small leaf. I think there's some other kinds of shrubs in here that we could use. All right, say something like this. And again, I start placing, this is where I'm actually kind of doing some design work as I'm placing these in there. I could, start filling this in. I might decide, well, really based on this view, that's kind of feeling a little crowded. So I'm going to go back to move mode, hit trash, and I want to come in here and maybe get rid of a few of those. And I don't really like this one right out front there. I don't want that view to open up, and maybe I could pick up some of those, go back to place mode, pick up some of those flowers again, and maybe mask placement. And bring those. And again, in this case, I'm going to hover over and get rid of those. Okay, to repeat that a little bit, get some of that connection between those. Again, once they're placed, I can go in and get rid of individual ones, but it gives me a way to kind of experiment with those design ideas. Maybe I want something up here to help block my view. I maybe want to place some other evergreen trees. You can start seeing from the other point of view what that looks like. Create a little bit of an entranceway here. So I'm going to come back. Let's go to evergreens, balsam fir. Come in here and add some of those. Oops, sorry. Don't want to do that. Let's go back to individual placement here. And I'm actually going to create kind of a backdrop. And maybe this is more dense, tighter screen as you kind of come into this space. Again, jump back over here, click on that scene. Start seeing the effect that has now. I'm blocking off that view to the left-hand side. It's really focusing my attention down on the pavilion itself. And we can start kind of just exploring the different configurations of plant massings and how shading works and all that kind of stuff. So that's just another quick review on how to place objects or plants in there. If you wanted to add some people, same thing. We can go down here and click on people. And if we want somebody, walking through the park, we can place them in there. And that one again looked like it kind of jumped on me, so I'm going to delete that one. Try that again. You can see the preview. There we go. That's a little bit better. So you can just go in, again, you can use the mask placement for people as well. If you want a group of people, I already have a bunch of people under the pavilion, but that would be a logical place to do it. You could add a whole collection of different people, drag it through there and have them kind of randomly rotated and arranged within that space. Okay, so that's kind of how we're gonna first change the materials, adjust their characteristics. I'm gonna quickly add plant materials in here. And then once you've got a scene created, I can go back to my photo view, and here's where I can actually hover over one of these placeholders and click on the store camera. So now, just like I saved a scene in SketchUp, I've saved that scene in Lumion. So if I wanted to create another slightly different view, again, I first have to come back here and I can decide, well, maybe I want a little different framing on this one. Something like that. So again, I could come in here. Actually, I can just right click on this, say add, and then I can come back here, click a check mark, hover over this camera, click on store camera, and now I can switch back and forth between these. So take a few variations and decide which one gives you the best composition that you're looking for. Now, once I pick one of these, let's pick the first one again, I can add a bunch of custom styles, and I'm going to spend more time, again, another video going through all this, but since I provided this in class, it makes sense for you to just go ahead and click on the menu, choose File, and Load Effects. So all this is a set of an effects stack that I created by picking some of the ones that I think work well for adjusting the camera and lighting effects for rendering. So I'm going to choose that and click Open, and you'll see that this scene changed a little bit when I did that. The shadow pattern changed, some of the material appearances look different, and that's because I've included things like depth of field, 2-point perspective to make sure my vertical lines are vertical, a global illumination, which helps adjust the sun amount, the effect distance. Again, you can see lighting is what really is critical, fall off speed, reduce spots. So these are just some basic things that I added. One of the things that you want to adjust is sun. There is a sun setting in the weather tab in Lumion, but in this case, you want to adjust the sun to make your rendering the way you want it. So maybe if I want to pull the sun height up, if I want to change the heading, so where do you want the shadows falling? Kind of like the original. I like having some of those shadows falling around in the foreground, but I don't want them too long, so I'm going to pull the sun height up, maybe pull some of those so the trees on the right are casting shadows, gives a nice contrast in the foreground, and makes you understand that there are the trees over there and you're kind of walking through this space, and it lights up the plants underneath the canopy here. I change that heading enough. Those are all going to be in shade, and again, maybe that's okay, but I think in this case it gives a better look to it by having the sun coming from right to left and brightening up this and creating more contrast in the foreground. So it's those little subtle things in the composition that make it really work well. One of the other things is this shadow, soft shadows and fine detail shadows. I turn those off. You can see this detail shadows. If you watch the ground cover right here, when I turn that on, you see shadows within the plant, the leaves there. And the soft shadows gives you more of that soft edge, because the farther the shadow is away from the object that casts it, the more kind of blurry the edges get, and it's much more natural appearance. It's not so rigid and geometric as you get in a lot of shadows in 3D rendering software. So those two things, shadows really, the fine detail and the soft shadows really work well. And you just click this to go back. So the reflection plane, that's one of the things that if you click on the edit, it will go to this full screen mode, and you can see my water back here, and I'm going to click on add plane. I'm going to hold it over that water and click OK. So now go back to reflection. Now I think I'm going to get a little more accurate reflections now, because my plants, you can't see it real well here. I've got that covered up. But if we go into a different view, you'll see the reflections from the pavilions, and if I add more trees and plants, you'll get all that in there that you wouldn't get otherwise. So being able to tell Lumion, I want accurate reflections off of this plane. In this case, I don't have windows on vertical surfaces, so it's really just the horizontal water surface that I'm concerned about. And I can go back here again, click on this, and you'll notice that you add these effect stacks to these stored cameras. If I switch over to here, this one doesn't have it applied, so you can kind of see the difference in the quality of the rendering if you look at the detail in here, and just really has a big impact on the composition and the quality of your rendering. So think about sun direction, use this stack, and when you have more time, you can just explore it and experiment with it. Again, you just click on a particular item, and then you can adjust things like the depth of field. You can say, okay, I want it to be really in focus here. Click OK, and then it'll give you a little blur in the foreground, a little blur in the background, and again, makes it look a little more realistic. All right, now when you're ready to render this, you simply come down to the green button here, Render Photos. Click on that. I'd like these to be rendered out at least at print size, so it's 3840 by 2160. Again, that's based on the format of the wide angle format that I have here now. So I'm going to click on that. It will ask you to pick a name for it. So I'm just going to call that 4 and a location. And then you can sit back and watch Lumion go through the steps. So even when you apply those effects, it's still in preview mode. It's not really the quality that you're going to see with the rendering. What's really amazing about Lumion is it does some really nice ray tracings in a very short amount of time. I've worked a lot with V-Ray, SketchUp, and Rhino, and does a great job, but a rendering like this would probably take it 10 minutes to do. This is going to complete it probably in a minute or less, which is quite amazing. And once it's done here, I'll open it up in Photoshop and let you take a look at it and see what it's really doing. So you see it kind of flashing there a little bit as it goes through the passes of sampling everything. All right, so there we go, 44 seconds to do that. I'm going to say open the folder. There it is. I'm going to double click on that, open it in Photoshop. And there you go. So again, you can really see the detail of the flowers, the glossiness of the leaves. Now you can see the roundness of the edge of the coping on the wall there, and the detail from the weathering, and the bump map that shows these joints being raked back into the mortar there. So, and you can see the quality reflections in the water. So in a very short amount of time, you can go through and create a really nice rendering, and at the same time, think through your design process. You know, this is just the color. As I put this in there, I was thinking actually that maybe that isn't what I want there, because I've got this running into this and it's all in the foreground. I might rather take these purple flowers and put them along here to create that contrast that I see there. I like pushing these shrubs back so that your eye kind of follows this line in, hits this line, moves around, then depending on how you arrange the plants over here, you can frame the view of the pavilion and kind of give direction, reinforce the direction of these walls and the walkways. So that's all part of the planting design that you have to think about as you work through this. And the more you break these big areas down into small areas, you can have many more layers of plants and think about the function. But even at a coarse scale, use it to develop your design ideas and evaluate it. And then use those effects, that effect stack, to actually adjust parameters of lighting to make sure that everything renders clearly and sharply the way you want it. So the goal of this is, again, what I refer to as a perceptually realistic rendering, not photorealistic. You want some variation in there. You want weathering. You want everything to look like it's out in the built environment and indicate the effects of that environment on the various materials that you use. So hopefully that will help you finish up what you need to submit tomorrow. And as I said, after we get past this deadline, I will be going through and making a longer series of tutorials that will step you through the process of how do you set up a SketchUp model, how do you create the geometry in the most efficient way, how do you apply the materials, and then looking more in depth at each of these different stages, the weather, the landforms, the materials, and the objects that you're going to place in Lumion.